An elderly janitor helped a sick biker. Hell's Angels came back with quiet kindness. Please, Maria, do not cut my hours. I only need one more week to prove I can still keep up. Vernon Gable's voice cracked as he gripped the handle of his old cleaning cart with both hands, trying to hide the tremor running through his fingers. It was 9:43 p.m. inside the aging rural Ohio Community Center, and the 72-year-old janitor stood in worn brown work shoes with one split seam near the left toe, a folded utility notice for $74.50 tucked deep in his shirt pocket. His back had seized halfway through moving 3 heavy boxes of donated supplies, and every breath came shallow as the midnight shutoff warning pressed harder on him than the pain in his spine. Then the heavy double doors swung open with a violent gust of cold air, and a massive shadow stretched across the fluorescent-lit floor as Boone Iron Mitchell stepped inside, his creaking Hell's Angels-style leather vest dark against his broad chest, making the fragile old man look even smaller beneath the light. Vernon froze with one hand still locked on the cart. For one terrible second, he thought the biker had come to complain, to start trouble, or to remind everyone that men like him did not belong in quiet places built for community meals, adult classes, and senior programs. Iron stood in the doorway without speaking, 6'4", broad as a garage door, his gray-streaked beard cut close to a hard jaw, old scars crossing one cheek, black tattoos disappearing beneath the cuffs of his leather jacket. The faint smell of engine oil, old leather, and cold road air followed him into the lobby, along with the dying rumble of a deep V-twin outside. He looked like danger with boots on, but his eyes went straight to Vernon's hands. Maria Rodriguez stepped out from behind the front desk with a clipboard pressed to her chest, her face tight with concern and caution. She had been trying to say the words gently for 10 minutes, trying to tell Vernon that the center could no longer let him work late alone after 2 near falls and 1 missed shift from back pain. She respected him too much to call him weak, but the truth sat between them anyway. Vernon could feel it. "Vernon," Maria said softly, "I am not firing you." The old man swallowed hard and forced himself upright, though the movement sent a flash of pain across his face. He hated that Iron was seeing him like this, bent over a cleaning cart, begging for hours like a man who had run out of pride before he had run out of bills. He tried to smooth the front of his faded work shirt, but his fingers would not stop shaking. The notice in his pocket felt heavier than paper. "I can still work," Vernon said. Maria lowered the clipboard, her expression softening. "I know you can, but not like this. Not until midnight. Not lifting boxes alone. Not pushing that broken cart until your back gives out." Vernon looked down at the cart as if it had betrayed him. The left front wheel was bent inward, the metal frame was rusted along the bottom, and one shelf rattled every time he moved it over the cracked linoleum near the pantry hallway. He had fixed it with wire, tape, and stubbornness more times than he could count. Tonight, even stubbornness had failed him. Iron took 2 slow steps forward. The sound of his boots filled the room, heavy and deliberate, but he kept his hands low and open. Maria stiffened, ready to speak, yet Iron did not look at her first. He looked at the box beside Vernon's feet, then at the old man's drawn face, then at the utility notice peeking from the pocket of his work shirt. Something in his expression shifted, small and almost invisible. The hard look stayed, but the threat left it. "You should not be lifting that," Iron said. Vernon blinked. The voice was low, rough, and calm. "I am fine," Vernon muttered, because it was the only answer he had practiced long enough to believe. "Just got a little stiff. Happens at my age." Iron did not argue. He simply bent, picked up the heavy box of supplies with both scarred hands, and set it on the counter as if it weighed nothing. Then he turned back to the old cleaning cart and studied its broken wheel with the same attention a mechanic gives a cracked engine block. He crouched slowly, leather creaking at his shoulders, one tattooed hand braced against his knee. "This wheel has been fighting you for a while," Iron said. Vernon's mouth tightened. "It still rolls." "Barely." Maria glanced from Iron to Vernon, surprised by the quietness of the exchange. She had expected the biker's arrival to make the room more dangerous, not calmer. Yet Iron's silence did not feel empty. It felt controlled. He was watching the problem before touching it. Outside, another motorcycle rolled into the parking lot, then another, their engines settling into a low, thunderous idle beneath the windows. The deep V-twin rumble vibrated through the old floor tiles like distant weather. Vernon felt it in his knees. Iron rose slowly from beside the broken cart, his leather vest creaking at the shoulders, his massive shadow still stretched across the floor. He looked at Vernon for one long second, as if trying to place a memory he had never forgotten. "We need to talk," Iron said. Vernon had no answer. The roar of the motorcycles outside settled into a low, guttural idle. Then one by one the engines cut out, leaving an almost unsettling quiet in their wake. Vernon Gable stood beside Maria Rodriguez near the community center's main entrance, one hand still close to the old cleaning cart, both of them looking toward the large glass doors. A moment later, the men who had waited outside followed Iron in, filling the lobby with worn leather, heavy boots, cold road air, and the faint smell of gasoline. They were dressed in dark shirts and weathered vests, many marked with patches and road-worn symbols that Vernon did not recognize but instinctively understood carried weight and history. Their boots made deliberate, echoing sounds on the worn linoleum floor as they stepped in behind their leader, silent and watchful. Maria stiffened beside Vernon, her posture becoming rigid, her hands unconsciously clasping together in front of her, a professional demeanor masking a flicker of apprehension in her eyes. These men did not look like the usual neighbors arriving for evening adult programs or seniors coming for bingo night. They looked like they belonged on the open road, under a wide sky, not inside a quiet community center filled with the scent of old books and floor wax. Maria, ever the director, took a determined step forward, her voice firm despite a slight tremor she could not quite suppress. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" she asked. Iron's gaze, which had been sweeping the room, returned to Vernon with a focused, unwavering stare that made the old janitor feel suddenly exposed, as if his quiet life had been pulled under a harsh spotlight. Vernon felt a knot tighten in his stomach, a mix of fear and the shock of recognition. He had tried to put that day out of his mind, the memory of Iron looking so vulnerable in the restroom, so unlike the man who now stood before him with his silent, watchful brothers behind him. He clutched the handle of his broom, knuckles white, a small, unconscious gesture of defense, a familiar comfort in his hand. Iron took a slow, deliberate step forward, his eyes never leaving Vernon's face. His presence seemed to shrink the already modest lobby. "My brothers are with me," Iron said, his voice a low, resonant rumble, surprisingly calm, and even for a man of his size and intimidating appearance. "We are not here to make trouble." Maria looked from Iron to Vernon, her expression caught between professional caution and growing confusion. Vernon stepped slightly in front of her, a silent, protective instinct kicking in, shielding her subtly from the biker's direct focus. Iron simply nodded, a slow, deliberate movement that conveyed both acknowledgement and an unspoken purpose. His intense gaze softened just a fraction, a flicker of something Vernon could not quite decipher, something that seemed out of place on such a rugged face. "Somewhere quieter, Vernon," Iron said, his voice dropping lower, becoming almost a private murmur. "Just you and me." The words hung in the air, weighted with an unspoken history, leaving Maria looking from Vernon to Iron with visible apprehension. Vernon's mind raced, trying to recall every detail of that day, wondering what this man, now backed by his club, could possibly want after all this time. He felt a shiver of dread, a cold certainty settling in his bones, knowing that whatever came next would not be a simple conversation. Boone Mitchell's request to speak in private hung in the air, thick with unspoken meaning and a palpable tension. Vernon Gable, still clutching his broom, felt Maria Rodriguez's eyes on him, a silent plea for him to be cautious, a worried furrow in her brow. Iron, however, did not wait for an answer or for Vernon to fully process the request. He turned slightly, gesturing with a tilt of his head toward a quieter alcove near a bulletin board, away from the main entrance and Maria's direct line of sight. It was a space usually reserved for forgotten coats or outdated flyers, a nook of quiet neglect. "This way, Vernon," Iron said, his voice firm, leaving no room for argument, his tone a quiet command. Vernon hesitated for only a moment, his gaze briefly meeting Maria's. She watched them go, her expression a mixture of apprehension and a director's professional curiosity, her hands still clasped tightly. She did not follow, but she did not turn away either, remaining a silent sentinel by the front desk, her attention fixed on their retreating figures. The alcove was small, lined with dusty shelves of forgotten brochures and a display case holding a few faded trophies from long-past old county volunteer awards. It offered a semblance of privacy, though the hum of the center's fluorescent lights still filled the space, a constant, low drone. Iron turned to face Vernon, his intense blue eyes fixed on the elderly janitor's face, searching, assessing. "Do you remember me, Vernon?" Iron asked, his voice low, almost gentle, a stark contrast to his imposing presence and the leather-clad men waiting silently in the lobby. Vernon swallowed, his throat suddenly dry, the memory of that day months ago rushing back with a sudden, vivid clarity. The cold sweat, the pale, drawn face, the way Iron had been slumped against the wall in the men's restroom, barely conscious, looking utterly vulnerable, stripped of his usual intimidating aura. It was a sight Vernon had tried to forget, a private, undignified moment he had never spoken about, out of respect for the man's privacy. "Yes," Vernon replied, his voice a little hoarse, a slight tremor in his hand as he tightened his grip on the broom handle. "You were not feeling well." "Very unwell." He shifted his weight, feeling a familiar discomfort at discussing such a personal, undignified moment, his cheeks warming slightly with a blush of embarrassment. Iron nodded slowly, his gaze unwavering, but now tinged with a deep, almost solemn sincerity. "I was sicker than I have ever been, Vernon. Alone. And you, Vernon, you found me. You did not judge. You did not call the police, or make a spectacle. You just helped." He paused, letting the words sink in, allowing their weight to settle in the quiet space. "You got me water. You called for medical help, discreetly, without drawing attention to me or your concerns. And then, after the paramedics took me away, you cleaned up the mess. Without a word to anyone. You preserved my dignity, Vernon. You treated me like a human being, not a problem." Vernon looked down at his worn work boots, a flush creeping up his neck, a deep embarrassment, not for what he had done, but for being acknowledged for it, for having his quiet act brought into the light. "It was nothing, really," Vernon mumbled, shrugging his shoulders, trying to dismiss the gravity of the moment. "Just doing my job. Anyone would have done the same. It was the right thing to do." Iron shook his head slowly, a deliberate movement that conveyed a deep disagreement. "Not anyone, Vernon. And not the way you did it. Most people would have called the authorities, made a fuss, or worse. You saw a man in trouble, a man who probably looked intimidating, and you offered quiet kindness. That is not nothing. That is everything." Iron leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a near whisper, the intensity in his eyes deepening, becoming almost a silent promise. "We do not forget a debt, Vernon, especially one that was never asked for. And we always pay them back. In full." Vernon looked up, meeting Iron's gaze directly. He saw not menace, but a deep, unyielding sincerity, a profound sense of principle. A shiver ran down Vernon's spine, a mix of unease and a strange, unexpected recognition of a shared understanding, a connection forged in a moment of vulnerability and quiet compassion. He did not know what Iron meant by paying back, but he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this conversation was far from over, and his quiet act of kindness was about to return in an unexpected way. Boone Mitchell's intense gaze lingered on Vernon Gable, a silent acknowledgement of the janitor's discomfort, a recognition of his quiet pride. Vernon's earlier embarrassment still warmed his face, and he shifted his weight from foot to foot, wishing the conversation would simply end, wishing he could return to the familiar comfort of his routine. But Iron did not move. Instead, his eyes began to sweep across the community center's interior, a slow, deliberate assessment that took in every detail, every sign of wear and tear. He noticed the scuffed paint along the baseboards, the faint water stain on a ceiling tile near the community craft room, a small crack in the plaster above a doorway, and the slight wobble in the handrail leading to the lower level. His gaze was thorough, missing nothing. "This place has seen some years," Iron observed, his voice thoughtful, almost reflective, not critical. "Takes a lot to keep an old building running, does it not, Vernon? Especially one that serves so many people." Vernon nodded, still unwilling to meet Iron's direct stare for too long. He knew every creak and groan of the old building, every spot where the paint was thinning, every draft that snaked through the windows in winter. It was his daily battle, a silent war against time, wear, and the constant traffic of a busy community. "It is a good place," Vernon said quietly, a hint of defensiveness in his tone, a fierce loyalty to the building he had cared for so long. "Serves the community well. The adults in the literacy group love the library, and the seniors enjoy their programs." Iron's gaze sharpened, returning to Vernon, a knowing glint in his blue eyes. "I'm sure it does. But good places need good care. Are there things that need fixing? Things that are beyond your usual broom and dustpan? Things that might be causing you extra trouble?" Vernon hesitated, his pride rebelling at the thought of listing the center's imperfections, which felt like admitting his own limitations, his inability to keep up with everything. He thought of the perpetually dripping faucet in the break room, a constant, annoying sound he had learned to ignore, but which wasted water and irritated Maria. He thought of the main entrance door that sometimes stuck, requiring a hard shove that jarred his aching shoulder. He thought of the worn-out floor polisher that barely worked anymore, making his job twice as hard. But he only offered a small, dismissive wave of his hand, trying to appear nonchalant. "Oh, just the usual wear and tear, Iron. Nothing major. A few loose tiles, perhaps. A little paint touch-up here and there." He downplayed everything, unwilling to expose the full extent of the center's needs, or his own growing struggle to meet them. Iron, however, seemed to read between the lines of Vernon's reluctance, understanding the unspoken pride. He simply nodded again, a knowing look in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of Vernon's unspoken resistance. He understood that Vernon would not ask for help directly, that it had to be offered in a way that preserved his dignity. Without another word to Vernon, Iron turned and walked purposefully toward the front desk, where Maria Rodriguez still stood, watching them with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension, her arms now crossed defensively. Vernon watched him go, a fresh wave of unease washing over him. What was Iron going to say to Maria? Iron stopped a respectful distance from Maria's desk, his posture relaxed but attentive. "Ma'am," he began, his voice calm and even, a polite formality in his tone. "My club and I would like to offer some help around the center. Some volunteer work." Maria's eyes widened slightly, her skepticism immediately evident, a flicker of suspicion crossing her face. She straightened, her posture becoming more formal, her professional guard fully up. "Help? What kind of help, Mr. Mitchell?" she asked, her tone guarded, a clear challenge in her voice. "We are a community center. We have a budget and procedures for hiring contractors, and we certainly do not accept just anyone." Iron met her gaze directly, his blue eyes steady and clear. "We have skills, ma'am. Welding, carpentry, painting, general repairs. We want to give back." Vernon here mentioned a few things that could use attention, some of the wear and tear he is always battling. He did not mention Vernon's hesitation, only the needs. "For example, I noticed the faucet in the break room has a steady drip. We can fix that. No charge. Just a thank you to the center, and to Vernon, for his quiet kindness." Maria's wary expression softened, just a fraction. The leaky faucet was a persistent problem, one Vernon had mentioned struggling with, and one that had been on the maintenance list for months, always pushed aside by more urgent repairs due to budget constraints. It was a small, practical detail that resonated, a specific offer that cut through her general apprehension. Iron's calm demeanor, coupled with the specific, tangible offer, chipped away at her reservations. She looked from Iron to Vernon, who stood a little distance away, still holding his broom, watching them intently, his face unreadable. Maria weighed the club's reputation against the genuine, practical offer of help. "All right, Mr. Mitchell," Maria said slowly, a cautious agreement in her voice, a reluctant concession. "We can start with a few small projects. The faucet, perhaps that wobbly handrail by the senior activity room. Under my supervision, of course. And we will need to formalize this with some paperwork." Iron offered a small, respectful nod, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. "Understood, ma'am. We will not be a bother. Just here to work. And we are happy to fill out any paperwork you require." Maria still looked a little unsure, but the promise of free, skilled labor for long-neglected repairs was too tempting to refuse, a welcome relief for her strained budget. Vernon, from his vantage point, felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. The bikers were staying, and they were going to fix things. He did not know what to make of it, but a small part of him, the part that had worried about the old building for years, felt a flicker of unexpected hope. Over the next few days, the community center, usually a place of quiet routines and predictable schedules, experienced a new, subtle rhythm. It was a rhythm punctuated not by loud engines, but by the soft clink of tools, the gentle scrape of sandpaper, and the low murmur of voices. A few bikers, always led by Boone, Iron Mitchell, appeared each morning, parking their gleaming motorcycles discreetly at the far end of the lot. They were not the full, intimidating group that had first arrived, but a smaller, focused crew of 3 or 4 men. They moved with a quiet efficiency that surprised Vernon Gable. He had expected bluster, perhaps some loud music or boisterous chatter, but instead, they worked with a focused intensity, respectful of the center's purpose and its patrons, the seniors and adult patrons who moved through its halls. Vernon, ever observant, watched them from a distance as he went about his own duties, pushing his heavy cart, sweeping, and mopping. He saw one of the bikers, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and calloused hands, kneel by the break-room sink. He pulled out a specific wrench from a canvas tool roll, its metal gleaming under the fluorescent light. The old faucet, which had dripped relentlessly for months, a constant, irritating soundtrack to Vernon's lunch breaks, was quickly disassembled with practiced ease. The biker replaced a worn rubber washer, tightened a nut with a precise turn, and within minutes, the constant drip was gone. The silence that followed was almost jarring, a small but profound victory for peace and quiet in Vernon's daily life. Later, Vernon saw another biker, a man in his 30s with strong, tattooed arms and a focused expression, working near the wobbly handrail leading to the public meeting area. This was a spot Vernon often worried about, especially when older patrons used the steps every day, gripping the unstable rail. They waited until the hallway was clear, laid down a fire blanket, placed a small extinguisher beside the wall, and asked Maria to check the area before the first spark flew. The biker had a small, portable welding unit, its tank hissing softly. He worked with precision, sparks flashing briefly in controlled bursts, then fading as he fused the metal. The faint, metallic smell of ozone hung in the air for a short while, quickly dissipating. When he was finished, the handrail, once loose and rattling with every touch, was solid, unyielding, and safe, firmly anchored to the wall. Vernon tested it himself later, pressing his full weight against it. It did not budge, a testament to the biker's skill. Maria Rodriguez, initially wary and cautious, found herself relaxing. She saw the careful way the bikers cleaned up after themselves, leaving no trace of their work except for the improvements. She saw their quiet respect for Vernon, often nodding to him as he swept past, or moving their tools out of his way without being asked, always with a polite, "Excuse me, Vernon." She began to see not just bikers, but skilled tradesmen offering their time and expertise, men who respected the space and its mission. Vernon, too, felt his initial suspicions slowly give way to a quiet appreciation, a grudging respect. He noticed the small details, the way they covered the floor with tarps before painting, the way they spoke in low tones so as not to disturb the classes, the way they always asked Maria if their work was satisfactory before leaving for the day. They were not just fixing things, they were caring for the building, just as Vernon did, with a quiet dedication he recognized. He still carried his worn broom and dustpan, symbols of his long service, but now, as he swept the newly quiet break room, he felt a strange sense of companionship, a shared purpose. He did not speak much to the bikers, and they did not press him for conversation, understanding his quiet nature. But there was an unspoken understanding growing between them, a shared respect for honest work and quiet dedication. He knew they were paying a debt, as Iron had said, but it felt like something more, something that eased a burden Vernon had not realized he was carrying alone, a quiet weight lifted from his shoulders. Boone, Iron, Mitchell watched Vernon Gable from across the community center's main hall, his blue eyes observant and thoughtful. Vernon was pushing his old cleaning cart, a heavy, metal contraption with squeaky wheels and rust spots, across the worn linoleum. Iron noticed the way Vernon leaned into it, his shoulders hunched, his steps slow and deliberate, each movement an effort. The cart was clearly a burden, especially when its stiff wheels caught on a loose tile or a seam in the floor, forcing Vernon to use his full body weight to dislodge it. Iron had seen Vernon wince more than once, a subtle tightening around his eyes, a quick clenching of his jaw that spoke of hidden pain, of a body pushed beyond its limits. He remembered his own body's betrayal when he was sick, the way simple movements became monumental tasks, the crushing weight of vulnerability. He understood Vernon's quiet struggle, the fierce pride that kept him from complaining, the unwavering determination that pushed him forward despite the obvious discomfort and the visible strain on his aging frame. Iron walked over to Maria Rodriguez's office, knocking gently on the open doorframe. She looked up from her computer, a slight, genuine smile on her face, a clear sign that her earlier wariness of the bikers had significantly lessened, replaced by a growing trust. "Mr. Mitchell," she greeted him, her voice much warmer and more relaxed than before. "Please, come in. The handrail is solid as a rock, and the faucet has not dripped once. We are all very grateful for your club's work. The place feels much better." Iron nodded, a hint of a smile touching his lips, but his gaze was serious, his purpose clear. "Maria," he began, his voice low and earnest, "I wanted to ask you something about Vernon. Something a little more personal." Maria's smile faded, replaced by a look of concern, her brow furrowing slightly. "Vernon? Is everything all right? He seems a little lighter these days, with the repairs you all have done." Iron lowered his voice further, leaning slightly against the doorframe, ensuring their conversation remained private. "He is a proud man. I can see that. But that cleaning cart, it looks like it is working him harder than he should be working. It is old, heavy, and those wheels are terrible." Maria sighed, a sound of gentle frustration and deep affection. "He is. I have tried to talk to him about it. About slowing down, about getting help, about replacing that old cart. But he refuses. He lives alone, Mr. Mitchell. This job, this center, it is his life. His purpose. He does not want to feel like a burden, or like he is losing his independence. He sees it as giving up." She paused, her eyes softening with a deep empathy. "He is a good man, Vernon. He always has been. He just does not know how to accept help, especially when it feels like charity." Iron listened intently, his eyes thoughtful, absorbing every word. He understood that kind of stubborn pride, that fierce independence. He had seen it in himself and in many of his brothers, a strength that could also become a cage, isolating a man when he needed connection most. "Does he have any family nearby?" Iron asked, seeking to understand the full scope of Vernon's situation. Maria shook her head slowly, a touch of sadness in her expression. "No, not really. His wife passed away years ago. His adult son and daughter moved out of state, busy with their own lives. He is very much on his own, for all intents and purposes. This center is his family." Iron nodded slowly, absorbing the information, connecting the dots. He understood the depth of Vernon's situation now, the quiet desperation behind his refusal to admit weakness, the profound need for purpose. He knew what he had to do, and that it had to be done in a way that honored Vernon's pride. "Thank you, Maria," Iron said, his voice firm with a new resolve, a plan already forming in his mind. "I think I have an idea. Something that might help Vernon, without making him feel like a burden." He walked away from her office, pulling out his phone as he moved. He made a few quick calls, speaking in low, concise tones, his words precise and clear, outlining a specific request. He was arranging something specific and practical, something that would address Vernon's unspoken need without stripping him of his dignity or his sense of purpose. Maria watched him go, a sense of curiosity and a flicker of hope stirring within her. She had seen the quiet kindness of these men, their unexpected generosity, and she wondered what unexpected gesture they might be planning next for the stubborn, good-hearted janitor who was the heart of her community center. On Friday evening, as the final adult literacy workshop wound down and the last voices faded into the quiet hum of the building, Vernon Gable began his usual end-of-shift routine. He moved slowly, his body aching from a week of work, his mind already drifting toward the quiet solitude of his small apartment, anticipating the simple comfort of his worn armchair. He pushed his old, heavy cleaning cart down the main hallway, the squeak of its stiff wheels a familiar, weary rhythm, a constant reminder of the day's physical toll. He had just finished mopping the lobby, the scent of lemon cleaner lingering in the air, when Boone Iron Mitchell appeared, his presence still commanding, but now carrying a different weight, one of quiet purpose. Iron was not alone. Maria Rodriguez stood beside him, her expression a mixture of anticipation and a soft smile. A few of the regular community center patrons, including an elderly couple who often played chess in the common room, were clustered nearby, their faces holding a mixture of curiosity and expectation. "Vernon," Iron said, his voice carrying clearly in the emptying hall, gentle but firm. "Could you join us for a moment? In the break room, if you do not mind." Vernon felt a flicker of surprise, then a nod of apprehension. He was not accustomed to being called for anything other than a new spill or a forgotten task. He looked at Maria, who offered a small, encouraging smile, a silent reassurance. Setting aside his broom, Vernon slowly pushed his cart toward the break room, a sense of quiet apprehension settling over him, wondering what new problem awaited him. When he stepped inside the break room, his breath caught in his throat. The small room, once dingy and smelling faintly of stale coffee and old cleaning supplies, was utterly transformed. The walls, previously a tired, faded yellow, were now painted a warm, light cream color, making the space feel larger, brighter, and more inviting. The old, chipped formica table still stood in the center, a familiar anchor, but in a corner, where Vernon usually ate his lunch perched on a hard plastic chair, sat a brand-new, comfortable armchair upholstered in a soft, durable fabric in a calming shade of blue. It looked inviting, a place for real rest, a haven of comfort. But what truly drew his eye, what truly made his heart skip a beat, was parked neatly by the door, right where his old, heavy, squeaky cart usually sat. It was a brand-new cleaning cart, sleek and modern, made of lightweight, durable plastic, with smooth rolling, silent wheels and organized compartments for all his supplies. It looked like something from a professional catalog, efficient and effortless, a stark contrast to his worn-out, metal contraption. Vernon stared at it, then at the freshly painted walls, then at the new chair. He looked at Iron, then at Maria, his mind struggling to process the scene, to make sense of this unexpected, overwhelming display. He felt a lump form in his throat, a mix of confusion and a profound, unexpected emotion that threatened to spill over. "What is all this?" Vernon managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper, thick with unshed tears, a plea for understanding. Iron stepped forward, his gaze gentle but firm, encompassing Vernon and the small group gathered. His presence filled the small, newly transformed room. "This is for you, Vernon," Iron said, his voice low but clear, filling the quiet room with its sincerity. "The room, the chair, and especially this cart." He gestured to the new cleaning cart, its clean lines gleaming under the refreshed light. "It is a thank you for looking out for a stranger when he needed it most, for your quiet kindness, for treating a man with dignity when he had none left." The words hung in the air, weighted with the history of that day in the restroom, a debt silently acknowledged, now openly repaid in a tangible, deeply personal way. Vernon felt a wave of warmth spread through him, quickly followed by the familiar, ingrained urge to protest, to say it was too much, that he did not deserve it, that he could not accept such a gift. But the sincerity in Iron's eyes, the quiet respect in his posture, and the gentle, knowing smiles on the faces of Maria and the patrons held him still, silencing his protests before they could fully form. He looked at the new cart again, imagining the ease it would bring to his aching body, the small comfort it offered. He saw Maria smiling, her eyes shining with understanding and a quiet pride. He understood then that this was not charity. This was a recognition, a validation of his quiet service, a profound gesture of gratitude that went beyond mere words, a testament to a kindness he had long forgotten. Vernon Gable stared at the new cleaning cart, then at the freshly painted walls, then at the comfortable armchair in the corner. His mind struggled to reconcile the image of the transformed break room with the reality of his old, tired workspace, the stark contrast between what was and what had been. A profound, unexpected emotion welled up inside him, hot and stinging behind his eyes, blurring his vision. He felt the familiar lump in his throat, the one that always appeared when he was deeply moved or when his quiet pride was challenged. He tried to speak, but his voice was thick with unshed tears, caught somewhere between gratitude and an ingrained reluctance to accept such a gift. "What is all this?" he managed to ask again, his voice barely a whisper, a plea for them to take it all back, to tell him it was a mistake, that he had misunderstood. He felt the familiar urge to protest, to say it was too much, that he did not deserve such generosity, that he was just the janitor. His ingrained independence, his lifelong habit of giving without expectation or acknowledgement, made accepting such a personal, profound gift almost impossible. He started to shake his head, a silent refusal forming on his lips, his gaze darting nervously between Iron and Maria. But Iron stepped forward, his expression gentle but firm, his presence radiating a quiet authority that stopped Vernon's protest before it could fully form. "It is not charity, Vernon," Iron explained, his voice low and steady, carrying conviction, a deep understanding in his tone. He met Vernon's gaze directly, an unspoken history passing between them, a shared memory of vulnerability and compassion. "It is paying a debt. You gave me dignity when I was at my worst, when I was vulnerable and alone, a man who had nowhere else to turn. You did not ask for anything in return. You just helped. You saw a human being in need, not a biker, not a problem. We are just giving a little back, Vernon. A thank you for that quiet kindness, for that respect you showed me." Iron's words were not a demand, but a sincere explanation, a reassertion of the principle he had shared earlier, a careful framing of the gesture. He was not offering pity. He was offering respect, acknowledging Vernon's past act as a valuable exchange, a debt honorably repaid, making it acceptable for Vernon to receive. Vernon listened, his eyes fixed on Iron's face, searching for any hint of insincerity, but finding none. He heard the genuine sincerity, the complete lack of condescension in Iron's voice. He remembered that day in the restroom, the raw vulnerability he had witnessed, the simple human need he had met without hesitation. He remembered Iron's words about dignity, about being seen as a human being. And as Iron spoke, Vernon felt a subtle, profound shift within himself. The wave of embarrassment began to recede, slowly, replaced by a warmth that spread through his chest, a feeling of being truly seen and valued. He looked at Maria, who stood watching, her eyes shining with understanding and a quiet pride in her longtime employee. She stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Vernon's arm, a comforting, supportive touch. "Vernon," Maria said, her voice soft but clear, her words cutting through his remaining resistance. "You are the heart of this center. You keep this place running. You look after everyone here, quietly, diligently. You deserve to be looked after too. This is not just for you. It is for everything you do for all of us." Her words, combined with Iron's steadfast gaze and the silent, respectful presence of the other patrons, finally broke through Vernon's defenses. He looked at the new cleaning cart again, so light, so efficient, a tool that would ease the daily strain on his aching body, a promise of less pain. He looked at the comfortable armchair, a place where he could truly rest during his lunch break, not just perch on a hard plastic seat, a small luxury he had never allowed himself. He saw not charity, but recognition, not a handout, but a profound gesture of gratitude for a lifetime of quiet service, for a single, selfless act of kindness. The tears that had been welling in his eyes finally spilled over, tracing warm paths down his weathered cheeks, a release of emotion he had held in for so long. He did not try to wipe them away. For the first time in a long time, Vernon felt seen, truly seen, not just as the janitor, but as Vernon Gable, a man whose quiet kindness had made a significant, lasting difference. He nodded slowly, a deep, silent acceptance in his heart, his shoulders relaxing, the burden he carried eased. His voice was still thick, but this time, it was with profound gratitude, a genuine emotion that filled the small, renovated room. "Thank you," Vernon whispered, his gaze sweeping over Iron, Maria, and the renovated room, encompassing everyone in his heartfelt appreciation. Thank you all, more than you know. The days that followed Vernon Gable's emotional acceptance of the gifts brought a new, quiet rhythm to the community center, a rhythm infused with a subtle, yet profound, sense of renewal. Vernon still arrived early each morning, his worn work boots scuffing the familiar linoleum, but there was a noticeable lightness in his step, a subtle spring that had been absent for years. He still carried his old, trusted broom and dustpan, symbols of his long service and unwavering dedication. But now, his main companion was the brand-new, lightweight ergonomic cleaning cart. It glided smoothly across the floor, its silent wheels moving effortlessly, its organized compartments holding his supplies without the heavy strain his old metal cart had imposed. He no longer had to lean into it, his shoulders hunched in pain, his back protesting with every push. The difference was profound, not just in his physical comfort, but in his spirit. He found himself whistling softly as he worked, a cheerful, forgotten tune he had not hummed in years, the melody echoing faintly in the quiet halls. The break room, with its freshly painted walls and the comfortable armchair, became his sanctuary, a true haven. During his lunch break, he would settle into the soft fabric, sipping his coffee, feeling a quiet contentment he had not known for a very long time. It was a space that felt like his own, a place of dignity and rest, a small corner of comfort in his demanding day. Maria Rodriguez watched Vernon with a warm, knowing smile. She saw the renewed energy in his movements, the subtle relaxation in his posture, the genuine peace in his eyes. The community center itself felt brighter, not just from the fresh paint in the break room, but from the solid handrail, the quiet faucet, and the overall sense of being cared for, of being valued. The small repairs made by Boone Mitchell and his brothers had a ripple effect, inspiring a few local volunteers to offer their own time for other small tasks, creating a new wave of community engagement. The bikers did not disappear entirely. They would occasionally stop by, sometimes just to nod at Vernon as he worked, sometimes to offer a quick hand with a heavy delivery, their presence now a familiar, reassuring sight rather than an intimidating one. Iron himself would sometimes lean against the doorframe of the break room, offering a simple, "Everything good, Vernon?" Vernon would always reply with a genuine smile and a quiet, heartfelt, "Everything is good, Iron. Everything is very good. Thank you." There was no need for long conversations, just a shared understanding, a silent acknowledgement of a debt repaid and a kindness remembered, a bond forged in an unexpected moment. Vernon understood now that the kindness he had offered to a stranger, without expectation or judgment, had returned to him in the most unexpected and dignified way. His fear of being a burden, of losing his purpose, had slowly receded, replaced by a quiet confidence and a renewed sense of belonging. He was still Vernon Gable, the janitor, but he was also a man who had been seen, valued, and cared for, a man whose quiet acts had resonated deeply. Sitting in his new armchair one afternoon, watching the sunlight stream through the freshly cleaned window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, Vernon felt a deep, quiet peace settle over him. He knew that life would still have its challenges, its aches and pains, but he also knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his heart, that true gratitude often came in unexpected forms, and that a simple act of human kindness, freely given, could create a ripple that returned, making the world, and his own small corner of it, a little brighter, a little more hopeful. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.